My first point is that in this highly integrated society,
and chairman of
an extra effort is needed through constructive discussion to get the widest possible agreement for policies which affect us all. My Lords, I greatly admire the readiness with which the noble Earl Lord Gowrie brings his intellectual gifts so readily and generously to friendly debate here. And we all acknowledge that our leader, the leader of our House, always prefers agreement if that is possible. But above them is the Right Honourable Lady, the Prime Minister. We recall the Right Honourable Lady's statement that she believes in consensus, but a consensus based upon her convictions. This attitude to power she emphasized in a television interview just before Christmas, when in answer to a question as to whether she ever listened to others, she said, "Yes, I listen carefully, and then I explain why I believe I am right." My Lords, current differences are not simply about market forces nor even monetarism. It is the extreme and intolerant way in which these concepts have been shaped into a cult or culture that is at the root of so much of today's discontent and disunity. And all this criticism cannot now be brushed off as a party point. There are conservatives who have earned great respect in our public life, and there are leaders of our established church who ask what Mr. Francis Pym calls in his recent book, the politics of consent. My Lords, can we not now in this House say that the assumption of infallibility is an unacceptable phase of democratic government? The Prime Minister's attitude is scarcely justified by conspicuous success in our economic affairs. Certainly the inflation rate has been brought down, but curbing inflation is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Those tragic tribes in Ethiopia have no problem with inflation. Some percentages have been quoted, and doubtless will be quoted again, to show how well we are doing. But the inescapable facts are that at the beginning of this new year, our pound sterling slumped to an all-time low, the unemployment figures reached an all-time high, and for the first time within our memory, we show a deficit in our overseas trading account in manufactured goods. My Lords, the stark figures of unemployed sadden us all on all sides of the House. But what gives me even greater cause for concern is the feeling, supported by facts, that the essential basis of a genuinely sound economy and society is being weakened and not strengthened by current attitudes and politics. The Chancellor has been massaging his accounts with thousands of millions of pounds of these transient oil revenues. 14,000 million in 1 year, I'm told. Then there are the thousands of millions of pounds from the sale of national assets. These enormous sums, over and above normal revenues, never before available to governments, have now come into the Treasury. They could be used for building the future. More basic research, wider and deeper technical education, long-term investment in industry, increasing the housing stocks, replacing those sewers, building the roads to the East Coast ports, and attending to those bridges and hospitals which NEDO say urgently need repair. But it is in this situation the Prime Minister has said that taxes should be cut. My Lord, not a positive provision for our national future, but tax gains. Some say that service industries will benefit. No doubt the financial services will get quite a boost. I have spoken before in this House about the growing imbalance between the effort and resources devoted to trading in money and that put into the actual creation of real wealth. This imbalance becomes ever more pronounced in the Western world. Professor Tobin, in his 1984 Fred Hirsch lecture, said this: I confess to a suspicion that we are throwing more and more of our resources, including the cream of our youth, into financial activities that generate high private rewards disproportionate to their social productivity. My lords, there is all the difference in the world between genuine savings, proper investment, prudent banking on the one hand, and the plethora of parasitic money dealing internally and across the exchanges that has grown up since the war. All facilitated by the margins provided today by absurdly high interest rates, and encouraged too by this current culture that short-term gains for self, however made, will somehow result in long-term gains for society. My lords, it is true that since the days when he came back from that war and helped lay the foundations for our new welfare state, there has been a great increase in wealth production. But that makes it all the more saddening, all the more difficult to understand why there should now be so much talk of the need to retrench. Proper economy, yes. A campaign for efficiency because we are proud of the service, yes. That is one thing. But cuts because we are told public expenditure is by definition a burden, that is demoralizing. My lords, last year I saw a notice in the local paper which said, in the interest of economy, flowers will not be planted this year in the following public parks. How extraordinary. In this increasingly clever world, with newfound energy resources, with microchips, computers, automation, we cannot afford to plant flowers in certain public parks. But of course the cuts go deeper, and yesterday's white paper, whatever the Noble Earl says, is a catalogue of cuts. A consultant cardiologist at the King's College Hospital wrote to the Times on the 20th of December. He said, the latest round of cuts has just closed one of our wards. It is not putting it too strongly to say that patients may die as a result of our being unable to accept them. This letter should not be accepted as a special plea for cardiac patients. All my consultant colleagues face the same difficulties. And that conscientious professional was constrained to add, ultimately it is the Minister of Health and behind him the Prime Minister who stand responsible. My lords, is it not just possible that somewhere we have some priorities wrong? A recent American report stated that a prosperous American family would now expect to own 3 to 5 television sets, sophisticated stereo systems, playback units, Betamax, video discs, and video games. My lords, if we get those promised tax cuts, no doubt more among us will move nearer to that splendid way of life. But can the consultants at King's College Hospital and elsewhere look forward more confidently to the days when hospital wards will not be closed over an extended holiday period? My lords, there is this evidence of wrong priorities, but are we not also encouraging self-interest instead of social responsibility? Mr. Milton Freeman lays it down that the role of the state should be to protect property, enforce contracts, control the money supply, maintain internal law and order, and promote external security. Beyond those limits, the theory is that individual choice should prevail. But this government now intervenes beyond those limits. Social engineering was once dismissed as a leftist concept, but this government now practices it in a big way. The Cheltenham affair is relevant. At the GCHQ, the government offered a bribe of £1,000 to those who would give up trade union membership. My lords, they lost a great opportunity to take a step forward in responsible trade union behavior. They were offered and could well have negotiated a no-strike agreement. Some Japanese firms have already shown this way forward. in British industry. And here was the chance to go forward in the public service. But no, the government preferred to spend public money to create non-unionists. Or take the council house sales. There is a good economic case for home ownership. There is also a case for a stock of public housing for those who need to rent. But there is no good case for selling off public property at such cut prices. Encouraging to buy is one thing, and I'm for it. But bribing to buy is another. 600,000 local authority houses have now been sold. Even allowing for owner occupation prices, the average sale must have been £5,000 per house below market price. In other words, some £3,000 million of public assets has gone in the furtherance of a political cause. Then there is the case of the BT flotation. In the December debate, criticism was made about the money lost through underpricing. The minister replied, in my view, 2,000 million, not merely 1,000 million, note the words not merely, would have been cheap at the price. My lords, cheap in what sense? And to secure what? Extension of share ownership, we are told. How far did this take us to national unity? How many unemployed bought shares? How many on supplementary benefit? And how many of the buyers will also be sellers for an easy profit? My lords, the millions of pounds spent on commissions and advertising was money spent not on encouraging social responsibility, but self-interest, or to put it more crudely, selfishness. What if this same self-interest motivates the BT unions when the next pay claim is put forward? How can we counsel restraint when all the propaganda has encouraged stagging and the creation of a body of shareholders whose purpose is not to put effort into that organization, but to get what they can out of it? My lords, here again, an opportunity has been missed. Supposing those millions spent on share pushing had gone instead on research and education about new forms of employee and consumer participation, and a new relationship between Whitehall and public sector management, which gave greater scope for managerial initiative. Could that not have been a more constructive investment in the future of our genuinely united nation? There is increasing evidence here and elsewhere that this emphasis on self-interest and the drive for that competitive cutting edge can have consequences that none can welcome. Even with extra public expenditure on bigger police forces, we shall not prevent those thrown out of work from sharing the same instincts as those in work. In this country, the Henley Centre of Forecasting last year predicted the middle-class home of the 1990s will be a luxurious, electronically controlled fortress from which the owner will be reluctant to leave. My lords, this is not a prospect which pleases me, and I am suggesting that we need changes in national leadership which would direct us to something more hopeful. New technologies must mean industrial changes, but we ought to be developing with urgency new social techniques and criteria to ensure optimum benefit from those changes. We shall not, for example, secure lasting benefit, nor ensure national unity by concentrating Whitehall propaganda on dividing the miners. My lords, if we talk proudly of an increased gross national product, I'm suggesting we should be more concerned with what kind of product. We should give up talking of public expenditure as a burden but proudly develop a carefully monitored contribution to the quality of life. If there is a choice between tax cuts and productive employment, and we should say firmly that we choose the latter. I'm saying, too, that if we are considering our potential effort, our total national capacity, we should recognize that there is a huge fund of energy and expertise that will respond to motives warmer and wider than self-interest. My lords, the lads I saw in the television pictures marching in that cold half-light to make the final assault in the Falklands were not spurred on by the prospect of a quick profit in the stock market. Their commander was not someone brought in from the outside at an inflated salary. My lord, those people among us who subscribed over £20 million in a matter of days for Ethiopian relief, they were not motivated by self-interest. There is, then, this hopeful side of human nature, and British human nature. And if our national policies appeal to it more directly and could be seen to apply more fairly, our total effort could respond, and we might even get that competitive cutting edge more quickly. My lords, I would like to think that much of what I have tried to say is consistent with that new moral effort to which the noble Earl Lord Stockton called in his memorable maiden speech. If we could take agreement that far, then, my lords, in further debate, and maybe with more time and with fewer distractions, we might make progress towards defining the practical measures which such agreement calls for. Meanwhile, I beg to move the motion standing in my name.
The Labour life peer who moves the motion of criticism of the government's handling of the economy.
My lords,
and
the question
Lord
is
Hailsham,
that the motion
Lord
standing
Chancellor.
in the name of the noble Lord Beswick be agreed to.
Lord Chancellor puts the question.
Lords, the
it's going to be
noble Lord
debated, and
Beswick
now
is
Lord
experienced